Natalie, you ready?
Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. I think we'll get started. My name is Larry Goodman. I'm president of Rush University and CEO of Rush University Medical Center. It's a pleasure to welcome everybody here today for the opening of the time capsule. It is interesting that we get such a great crowd for something like this. Certainly, as an academic medical center, there are discoveries here. There are great stories every day, and certainly people are interested in all of those. But nothing gets the crowds, the TV cameras, and streaming Facebook Live like opening up a box that was buried over a century ago to see what people put in it. And there's something intriguing about that. Let me give you a quick outline of how this brief program will go. I'll make a couple of additional comments, telling a little bit about the history of Rush and talking about time capsules in general. We will show you a quick 5-minute video which concerns some of the history of the construction of the buildings that were taken down over the last 10 months. We will hear from some Rush University students, Are You Harmony, who will be singing some of the songs that were made popular, or at least sung in that day, however popular they might have been, but they will be redone today. Many of you know that the oldest component of Rush is the medical school, which dates back to 1837. We've been on this site for almost all that time. And you can see these buildings dating back to the 1800s, which is a big part of our history. All of this integrated in the mission that we provide to the community that we serve. I think what's interesting about this is when I was looking back on what's the story with time capsules, how long have they been around, one of the oldest time capsules in the United States actually was under the Golden Dome at the Massachusetts State House that dates back to 1795. So it seems like around the 1800s was a particularly important time in the United States time capsule history. If you also think about some of the things that were written and made popular that people thought others would want to see 100+ years later. And we'll take a look at those things and what those slices of history really represent. Certainly, this history on the medical campus kind of demonstrates what a lot of cities have, which is the cobbling together of buildings over time as programs change and as they come together. And as we designed the new part of the campus, the new bed tower, our new orthopedic building, and other things, we always planned to create green space on the buildings on the more western part of the campus, which were old, less functional, and needed to come down. Now, those buildings create a lot of history. We're going to see some of it in the time capsule. For many of you, as they came down, people wanted to take sort of last walks through the building and take a look at things. But we also have some materials from the building, some of which are in the back of the room, others of which will be for sale after this event and have been for sale up to this event because they will be supporting our Child Life program. So far, some $15,000 have been raised in support of Rush's Child Life program. Hopefully you can later take home a memento and also continue to do some good, not only today, but then into the future with the people that the Child Life program will serve. So with that, I think we'll proceed to the video, and the next person you'll see up here after that will be Dr. Tom Deutsch, our provost. Thank you.
In 1888, when the Daniel A. Jones Memorial Building cornerstone was set in place, the memory of the Great Chicago Fire was less than 20 years old. In that brief time after the fire, the city's population had exploded from 500,000 to 1 million people.
In 1871, after the Great Chicago Fire destroyed the Rush Medical College campus in town, the Rush Medical College faculty and trustees chose to move to the west side to be near Cook County Hospital at Wood and Harrison. And this was a time period when a lot of medical schools offered only course-based education, lectures, and Rush Medical College faculty thought it was really important for students to actually get experience with patients, clinical experience.
The raging medical controversy of the day was how diseases were spread. During the 1870s, the groundbreaking work of Louis Pasteur, Robert Koch, and Joseph Lister proved that specific germs cause disease and infections. But medical beliefs were slow to change. For a typical surgical operation in the early 1880s, surgeons wore their street clothes. Many doctors in the United States, including some at Rush, still pushed the miasma theory, a belief not illogical that diseases were caused by bad air.
So while it still took some time for germ theory to gain complete acceptance, there were certainly Rush Medical College faculty members who realized the cause and effect between sanitary conditions and the outcome of their patients. So for example, Dr. Moses Gunn, who was a Rush surgeon and professor, stated in the 1880s, "I don't know much about the truth or falsity of the statements concerning bacteria, but I do know that if I wash my hands and wash my patient and my instruments and use carbolic acid in iodoform, I can accomplish results that I never dreamed of 15 years ago."
By the late 1880s, antiseptic surgical techniques became the norm. Sterile gowns appeared, as well as the use of boiled rubber gloves for surgery. Fortunately for patients, anesthesia had been around in various forms for the past several decades. Unfortunately, proper dosing was still an evolving art, and death to the patient could and did result.
In 1883, Rush Medical College trustees and faculty developed a teaching hospital, Presbyterian Hospital, with the support of local Presbyterian congregations. And they quickly outgrew those first buildings, so they opened Daniel A. Jones Memorial Building in 1888.
From the earliest years of the hospital, local churches would endow beds for $300 annually, so that poor patients need not worry about payment.
Another kind of sponsored bed were called cheer-up beds. So these were beds in the children's ward, and they were sponsored by local Sunday schools. And this tradition continued on for several decades and provided free care to thousands of sick children over those years.
Rush medical students at the time were a mixed bunch. Some of the older ones had been druggists, salesmen, and even cowboys. One day, when the learned Dr. Henry M. Lyman entered his lecture, he found a mess of thrown spitballs, shoes, snowballs, and apples. Disgusted, Lyman walked out and the lecture was canceled. Nowadays, lectures are a bit more orderly. By the time a small copper box was embedded in the cornerstone of the 5-story laboratory known as Senn Hall in 1902, the existence of different blood groups had only been known for 1 year.
The building's namesake was Dr. Nicholas Senn. He was an attending surgeon at Presbyterian Hospital and also on the surgical faculty for Rush Medical College. He was instrumental in raising the standards for admission to the school. He was really interested in an affiliation with the University of Chicago in the 1890s. And for the University of Chicago to agree to this affiliation, Rush Medical College would need to build a new facility to accommodate the influx of new students. And he contributed $50,000 of his own money. The University of Chicago and Rush Medical College were affiliated from 1898 until 1941.
A year before Senn Hall opened, the Chicago Tribune reported the humorous moment as Dr. Senn applied mortar to the cornerstone containing the time capsule. "Bring a scalpel," called a student in the crowd as the trowel was seen to tremble awkwardly, in striking contrast to the habitual steadiness of the operating knife in Dr. Senn's grasp. "Pass the doctor the artery forceps," echoed another, and then cheer after cheer broke out from the student ranks for their beloved leader. The growing patient population outpaced the output of trained nurses provided by the Illinois Training School for Nurses. So the school urged Presbyterian Hospital to develop its own nursing school. So in 1903, a year after Senn's doors opened, M. Helena McMillan founded the Presbyterian Hospital School of Nursing. McMillan, whose father persuaded her to not pursue a doctor's career, was described as a generous, determined woman with a good sense of humor, all traits embodied by Rush nurses over a century later. In the earliest years of the school, Miss McMillan pioneered innovations that other schools adopted decades later. She was among the first to require a high school diploma for entry into the program. Presbyterian Hospital was committed to utilizing the latest medical technology. Its 1904 annual report proudly displayed photos and engravings of the latest high-tech medical devices of the day, including the Tesla coil and tubes used for high-frequency electrotherapy, and, quote, the most complete X-ray laboratory in the West, unquote, the X-ray having been discovered just 9 years earlier.
In 1912, Presbyterian Hospital opened the Jane Murdoch Memorial Building for Women and Children. And this building replaced the two oldest buildings on Presbyterian Hospital's campus. And it also continued the connection, the physical connection between the Jones Building and Rush Medical College's building.
The Rawson Memorial Building opened in 1924 and marked the beginning of a new contract between Rush Medical College and the University of Chicago, which had been affiliated since 1898. Rawson provided state-of-the-art laboratory facilities to accommodate this new agreement and an influx of students.
This is particularly exciting for me because for many years I've had a list of items that are in the Rawson time capsule and in the Sin time capsule from records during those time periods. But Jones, I'm particularly very excited about because I have absolutely no idea what's in that one, and it's our oldest time capsule from 1888. So it could be anything. I'm very excited to find out what it is.
As the years passed, Chicago grew and Rush grew. Every new addition to the Rush campus resulted in important advances in patient care and continued excellence in healthcare. The hands that placed various objects in these rough-hewn boxes over a century ago were the hands of people just like us. People with a commitment and passion for improving the lives of countless individuals and communities, now and into the future.
sock hops they must have had in those days. I am Tom Deutsch. I'm the provost of Rush University. This is a somewhat bittersweet occasion for me. There are many people I see in this audience who have been walking the halls of Rush for quite some time and had opportunities to work in and out of these 4 buildings. I've actually had the opportunity to walk through those buildings over the course of the last 50 years, having been the grandson and the son of Rush doctors who practiced in that building. So some of my earliest memories are of the eye clinic. I'm an ophthalmologist, and the eye clinic was on 3 Rawson. I went there from the time, a lot of people are nodding. I went there from the time that I was a really very small child. We used to take the elevator up. There was a little tiny elevator that I think was constructed with the elevator operator, whose name was Frank. And Frank certainly looked like he was as old as the building, but continued to operate that elevator, I think, just about up until the time that they turned the elevator into an automatic elevator. The other things that I remember were in the Jones building. Now, the Jones building was a patient building, as has been said, and that building was really a very fancy building. There were fireplaces in some of the patient rooms. I also was a patient when I was 11 years old, and I stayed in a couple of the different rooms in Jones. That ended up later on being the place where I met my wife, who was a nurse on 5 Jones. So really a way in which all of this has kind of come together for me. There was a beautiful library in that building. The library was built in a 19th century style with a lot of oak and oak tables and beautiful big chairs. And that was a place where, when I was an early medical student, I used to study. And I also did research way up high in the 6th and 7th floors in the animal labs. Those labs had been constructed in an area that had been the surgical amphitheater. And you saw a little bit of some views in the video of surgeries that were taking place, like you would see today only on Grey's Anatomy, where people are watching operations. But in those days, it was actually very common. And it was an amphitheater that was built up around the operating room. And back 40 years ago or so, when I was doing research, you could still see the vestiges of that surgical amphitheater. So that is a huge memory in my mind. And finally, I was an intern at Presbyterian St. Luke's Hospital, most of the time in pediatrics, and the pediatrics wards, going full circle back to the original purpose of the Murdoch building, were mostly in Murdoch and Jones, the older buildings that had been kind of rehabbed. Actually, the story always was, back in the 1970s and 80s, that we were about to vacate the pediatrics wards and move into new space, and that actually happened last year. So, finally, I want to say that the opportunity that we've all had, all of us who have been at Rush for a long time, to experience a history of a place, that actually is ingrained into the culture of this institution, and it's one of the things that really makes me very, very proud to be a member of the Rush family. So thank you for allowing me to give some of those reminiscences. Now, we need to open the time capsules now. So they're going to be bringing in some heavy equipment, and I think some TNT. So you may want to kind of step back just a little bit. Actually, that's already been done. So through the miracle of modern technology, you're going to see on the video the kind of early beginnings of opening it, and then Natalie is going to show us what we found.
time to open them up. Oh, wow, 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 okay. Oh, wow, wow. Wow. We are about to leave you, sing a farewell greeting, and it forever our hours of meeting. You who have taught us science, truth, and virtue, hail and farewell we sing. Honor and blessing, Lord, and admiration, fill to repletion all your hours of labor, death and disaster, seeking air to vanquish hell, and farewell we sing.
Hello, I'm Natalie Wheaton. I'm a little hoarse today. I apologize. But a couple of business points before we get to the time capsules. I want to do some thank yous. First of all, I'm Natalie Wheaton. I'm the archivist here at Rush. Yes, we do have an archives. We are located on Van Buren in the Triangle Office Building. So if any of you have questions about Rush history or the archives, you can contact me about that. I do want to say that I'm showing materials here that range from the 1800s to 1924, but we have material going from 1837 and the founding of Rush Medical College all the way to the present. So just bear that in mind. It's not just the stuff. I wanted to thank our Historic Salvage Committee. They helped plan this event today. We've been working on this a really long time. So I'm so glad there's so many people here today. This is really exciting. And I hope people on Facebook are appreciating it too. So our group is also the group that was coordinating the salvage sale. So when we first heard the buildings were coming down, this was many years ago, we worked with many groups to determine what pieces would be salvaged from the building. So there are pieces being sold today. These are duplicate pieces. There's several pieces of each one. If something was truly unique or truly historically or architecturally unique, it has been retained by Rush and hopefully will be part of a potential Rush museum or displays throughout campus. So just keep that in mind. So I also wanted to thank a couple of other groups, and I'll talk about them in a minute. So Hennigan Wrecking has done just an amazing job with the demolition of the buildings, because you hear demolition and you think it's just demolition, but they did such an amazing job of salvaging the items before the buildings came down. So they did a very careful, respectful job of that. I'd also like to thank Bully and Andrews, one of our contractor groups here at Rush, who helped actually open. They were the ones that you saw in the video opening the time capsules. And I also want to thank Rush Photo Group for making these amazing videos. So if anyone from the Historic Salvage Group wants to give a little wave to acknowledge yourself. Hi, hi. Finally we're here. And one more thing we forgot to mention. So the songs you were hearing today, those are from the 1894 Rush Medical College yearbook, the Pulse. Those are online, actually. All the yearbooks from Rush and our predecessor nursing schools are all online. You can look at them. But those are actually from the 1894 yearbooks. So I'm going to start unveiling them from here across. And I've been mentioning the time capsules to people for a long time now. And every single time, someone would say, is this going to be a Geraldo Rivera, Al Capone's vault situation? So in the 80s, if you don't know, there was this huge buildup for this live television event of Geraldo Rivera opening this mysterious Al Capone's vault. It turned out to be empty, right? So after this big buildup, you know, he had egg on his face. So I can guarantee you today there were things inside of these boxes. They were not empty. I'm going to start with Sin. So Sin is over here. I'm just bringing my notes, but I do know what I'm talking about. Let me unveil. Okay, so this is the Sin time capsule. Now, if you noticed in the video, I'm not sure how obvious it was, but the Sin time capsule was sitting flush with the top of the cornerstone. And so we had some problems with it because of that. There were, that just popped right open with barely any force. There were cracks along the seams, so the material was damaged. It was wet, and there was mold. Now, just so you know, we have had it remediated, the mold remediated. It is stable. We just got it back this week from Midwest Freeze Dry. Thank you, Rory Dempsey and your team, for taking care of the remediation and freeze drying this material. So anyway, this is 1901. The building opened in 1902. And Nicholas Sin was mentioned in the video earlier, so you get some of that history. So again, Hennigan and Bruce Riley and his team helped remove the cornerstone, the time capsule from the cornerstone. So thank you very much for doing a really careful, respectful job of that. This is copper, and you can kind of see the green if you're close enough. That's the patina because it had been exposed to the elements for so long. And it was just not in good shape. So Sin and also Rawson were not huge surprises for me because I had lists ahead of time of what was going to be in them from the time period in the archives in the Rush Medical College records. So I knew it was going to be in there, but I'm going to show you a couple of things. I didn't bring everything here today because it was a lot of material. There's some more material on the tables, so once we're done here, we're going to move these things down there, and you can come look. Please look and don't touch. So here's an example of one of those pieces. So this is the bulletin for the school. And you can see it says, in affiliation with the University of Chicago. Again, this building was built to accommodate that new affiliation in 1898. And this just explains that whole situation pretty much. It explains the affiliation and what happened and why the building was built. So that's kind of an interesting piece. The Sin pieces are very fragile, so some of them I didn't even bring today because they would basically flake off in your hands. So being very, very careful. They will be digitized so that people can see them without having to touch them. Another example of an item from the Sin time capsule. This is a commencement program from 1901. So it takes you through the schedule for the day. This is another type of thing I had in the archives already in our commencement materials. I'm starting with Sin because it's the least exciting, just so you know. Now, if you've ever seen anything about a time capsule before, almost always you're going to find newspapers, okay? So, always, from the day of. So here is one from 1901. It's the Chicago American. This was a William Randolph Hearst publication, and it is way flashier than anything else that was going on at the time. So if you do get a chance to kind of look at the headlines, how they're written, how the pictures look, it kind of stands out from the other newspapers. He was really progressive in that way. And this talks about, you know, talks about Rockefeller and Carnegie, and so that's the time period we're talking about. So next is Rawson. Or next is Jones, I'm sorry. Okay, Jones was a little bit different. It's made out of lead. This was the first one that was found because Jones was the first building that came down. And you can see it's kind of peeled back. Lead is pretty soft, so they just kind of peeled it back. So Bully and Andrew, so Todd Jones and his team helped us out with actually opening this box and this box. So thank you very much for doing, again, a careful, respectful job of that. So these items, there was kind of a disappointment that turned into excitement. So what happened was the box was opened in the archives, and I just saw the top items. And we were waiting for a conservator to come from the Conservation Center. So thank you to Brian Copernicus and his team who helped us with that. And he was going to be responsible for removing the materials, assessing damage, and things like that. And before he got there, all I see on the top is 1915 stuff from an 1888 time capsule. So I was, and someone else mentioned later, like, that's still 100 years old. Like, yeah, but it's not 1888. So, so anyway, we, once the conservator got there, he started removing the material, and underneath was 1888. So what happened was, 1915 was ringing a bell with me, and it turns out, yes, that is when, if you're familiar with campus, that's when they removed all the towers and turrets from the top of Jones and replaced it with upper stories, and it became kind of like a block shape. So they were doing massive, major renovations at the time on the building. So I'm assuming they probably found an 1888 box or knew of one, and then made a newer box and put just a couple of things from 1915 on the top. So this building was named after Daniel A. Jones. He was a Chicago merchant and businessman. He was actually president of the Chicago Chamber of Commerce in the 1870s. So in this box, it also included, since he was a big name, material from 1886, because that's when he passed away. We have his last will and testament in there. We have newspapers from 1886 that include his obituary from New York, from Massachusetts. So that was interesting. Those were just kind of like, literally like kind of crammed in the box. So if they look kind of, they're actually in great shape considering how they were in the box. So I'm just going to show you a couple of those pieces before we move on to Rawson. But one of my favorite things, and I'll try to be careful because it's big. This is the floor plan for the first floor, 1888, by Shipman, the architect. He also designed the Wisconsin State Capitol, so if you're from Wisconsin, yay. It's beautiful, so if you do get a chance, take a look. It also includes, for example, the superintendent's quarters. So back in the day, the superintendent for the building would live in the building with his family. You can see there's the room for his children and the dining room for the family. On the same floor as patient wards and restrooms and things like that. So that's pretty interesting. There's also a copy of the Chicago Times. Again, these are just in amazing shape. So take a look at that. Now at this time in history, a big thing was following explorers on their adventures. So this follows Stanley, if you're familiar with Stanley and Livingston and all those people, following his adventures in Africa and what he was discovering at the time. So that's the time period we're thinking about here. And then just to show you what was on top, stuff from 1915. Now, I'm not saying that's not great. This is actually digitized and online already. All of the newsletters from all the hospitals to the present day are online and searchable, so check them out. Check out the Rush Archives webpage. I just wanted to say a couple of things about this 1915 one. There's an article that talks about their hospital unit. Now, this was during World War I, and Presbyterian had a base unit in France that was staffed by Presbyterian staff and nurses. So that was part of our history also. And then they kind of regrouped for World War II, and they were General Hospital, the 13th General Hospital, and served in the South Pacific. So that's kind of how it worked back then, was that a hospital from here would staff a hospital overseas. Moving on. This is Rawson. This is that big one. So when I'm done and we move the materials down there, I will say that what was really cool about Rawson was how shiny it is on the inside. Because I had forgotten, seeing the outside for so long, that these would have been beautiful, shining copper boxes when they were placed in their cornerstones. So for Rawson, the building was a gift from Stephen Rawson in memory of his father, Frederick Rawson, and they were both on the board of managers for the hospital for many years. The building was designed by Marshall and Fox architects, and they also designed the Drake Hotel, the Blackstone Hotel. Most of these buildings were designed by fairly well-known Chicago architects. This block, one quick story about the block from 1924 is that Rawson came down when I was out of town this summer. And when I came back and saw it was down, I said, "Oh great, where's the time capsule?" They said, "Oh, it was a solid block, sorry, the cornerstone was..." I have like a sheet of paper that says, this is the list on this date in 1924, so we need to figure this out. So they hired ground penetrating radar to, a firm to do ground penetrating radar on that cornerstone that you saw in the video. And that was pretty cool. It showed an anomaly. So it showed that there was something going on in there, some type of hollowness. So, if you do remember the video, this was really in there. And it's a very big box. It was very heavy. I could not lift it. It was full to the top, to the sides. And again, when you do get a chance, look at the copper on the inside. It's really pretty. So Bully opened it. Bully and Andrews, Todd Jones and his team opened it with clips, as you saw. So the edges are very sharp and they've been covered up. 1924 was a big deal for Rush, like I mentioned was mentioned in the video. That was a time of a new contract between Rush Medical College and the University of Chicago. So they've been affiliated since 1898, but in 1924, Rush became an organic part of the university. And what that means is the Rush Medical College buildings belong to the University of Chicago. If you were a Rush student, you were also a University of Chicago student. The Alumni Association from Rush was absorbed by University of Chicago, so it's things like that and much more that you can read about or ask me about. And there's supposed to be two archivists from the University of Chicago here today. I don't know if they're here, but Dan Meyer and Kathleen Feeney. I told them this box, just so you know, was full of University of Chicago material because it was a University of Chicago building. So it's not so much Rush. I didn't bring a lot of it because it was things like their academic journal, like every academic journal from that year in every discipline or field you can imagine, because of course they cover a lot of bases there. So, so imagine, that kind of thing, all their publications from the year. But there's also some interesting articles, medical articles that were written at the time and things like that. What I brought today is a newspaper. So, anyway, this is all about the O'Banion funeral. So he was a mob leader in Chicago who was killed in kind of rival gang warfare. So this was kind of peak time for that type of drama and action. So anyway, here's one of the great headlines. This is the Chicago Daily Journal. And I'll show you one other thing from this one. This is the daily newspaper for University of Chicago. Yes, daily. Unbelievable. What's great about this is that the local newspaper is talking about the gang warfare, about this funeral, and just all the action and suspense, whereas the daily newspaper for the university is talking about the research that the university was doing at the time to investigate what was going on with these gangs. They're researching how to solve this problem and how to help Chicago and things like that. So I kind of love that it has that kind of University of Chicago twist to the news of the day. I think that's really interesting. Okay, so when you saw me say, wow, wow, okay, that was edited first of all, thank you. I was excited, and I actually almost started to cry, and I'll tell you why. We have a fourth box, and this is not the fourth building. Murdoch did not, like we said in the video, Murdoch didn't have a cornerstone, it didn't have a time capsule. There was a fourth box. That's why this box was so big. I had a list of contents, like I said, for this one from 1924 that said what was in it. At the end of this list, it says, by the way, this is what's in the 1875 time capsule. I thought they were just kind of including that just to kind of record for posterity what was in I'll tell you what the 1875 time capsule is in a second. I thought they were just kind of recording that information or kind of comparing, well, this is what we would put in 1875, this is how things have changed, this is 1924. So when our conservator started to remove material from this box and I saw there was another box in there, I thought, oh, they literally meant this is part of the contents of the box, was the 1875 time capsule. The first building on the west side campus for Rush was 1875, Rush Medical College on Wood and Harrison, so catty corner to Old Cook County Hospital, which was replaced by Rawson in 1924. So for many years, I've seen this photograph of, and there's one over there, a copy of it, of the guys in 1924 opening the 1875 time capsule, and I'll show you in a second what they were holding up in that picture. And I always wondered, I've been an archivist here for a while, I've always wondered where did this stuff go from 1875 time capsule? You know, did it just disappear since 1924? I have so many records from this institution, and I was kind of heartbroken that I had no idea what had happened to them. So now the mystery has been solved. They were across the street in Rawson this whole time. So let me show you some interesting things from 1875. It's another copper box, and as you see, it's not opened quite as beautifully as the guys from Boley and Andrews were able to do. There's in the picture of them opening it, there's a hammer on the table and everything, so they really went at it. So let me show you a couple of these things. This was my most exciting box, so hopefully for you too. So on top of this box, in case we didn't already know, they did leave a nice little note in 1924 to explain that that was the time capsule from the 1875 building. So we really appreciate that. Luckily, I had that already in my records. So, like I said, it was catty corner to Cook County Hospital. And this is the rules and regulations for the government of Cook County Hospital. So this would have been before Rush Medical College developed Presbyterian Hospital, and they were very, very closely connected to Cook County, and that's why they had moved out here to the west side, to be near Cook County, so that the faculty could practice at the hospital, and also so that the students could get practical experience at a hospital. So, 1875 is just a few years after the Great Chicago Fire. Great Chicago Fire was 1871. And that's why we're on the west side. So you saw in the video, there's a picture of the students standing in the ruins of Rush Medical College's building. That was at Grand and Dearborn. And they'd been at that location since 1844. But the building and the ruins of the building, that building was from 1867. So the building was only a few years old, and they were very, very devastated by the loss of that really nice building that they'd only had for a few years. So this is, if you're familiar with Chicago and the Great Chicago Fire, you know that the water tower is one of the remaining buildings that survived the Great Chicago Fire. So they included a picture of that in the engine works. Quick story about the Great Chicago Fire in Rush, if anyone's interested. You're a captive audience. So Rush Medical College had 200 students that year. They had 200 students, and these students had just finished their first week of class on Friday, and the fire was Sunday. And some of these people had just moved to Chicago from other towns and lost absolutely everything, literally, you know, leaving town with the shirts on their backs, and lost, you know, were devastated. So that was very tragic. So what happened was, out of those 200 students, eventually about 150 returned to Rush. And Rush Medical College had agreements with medical schools across the country so that if students were unable to return to Chicago because of, you know, losing everything, that they would be accepted immediately to a medical school that was closer to them without having to deal with admissions and things like that. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit about that. That's the other one. This newspaper is interesting because it's in German. All the other ones are in English. There's quite a few newspapers. Some of them had maybe 6 or 7 newspapers from that day. There were a lot of local newspapers at the time. So this is the Free Press. I don't know how you would say it in German. I'm assuming Free Press, but I can't read it. And this solved a huge mystery for me. Like I said, I've been here for a while, and I have a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a picture, I don't know what it is, of this. This is our charter. Now, I don't know when it was actually written on the paper, but this is, a picture of this is what we always use to represent the charter for Rush Medical College, March 2nd, 1837, 2 days before the city of Chicago. We're older than Chicago. And this is the actual one that I'm assuming they had taken a photograph of it and then it was kind of photocopied over the years. So I always wondered, where's the actual charter? Did someone just, let someone borrow it and then it disappeared? So I don't know. Now we know. This is what got me very emotional. This is a picture of the faculty. Now, it's not because it's a picture of the faculty, but this is what they're holding up in that 1924 picture when they're opening the time capsule in 1924. So when I saw this, I was just, yeah. People here can verify that I was about to cry. We're almost done with this part. But this is interesting because this is from before the fire. Like I said, it was such a huge loss for everyone in the whole city, not just for Rush, to lose so much in the Great Chicago Fire. This is a Stranger and Tourist's Guide to the City of Chicago from 1866, so it precedes the Great Chicago Fire. So this is, what a tourist would want to go. I love how it says strangers, tourists and strangers, not just tourists. Chicago as it is. I saved this one for last just because it's so beautiful. It's so nice. I don't know if you can see it. I'm sorry if I wasn't holding things up well. I haven't had to do this before. This is the 1874-75 medical, or not medical, the city directory. So this is before phones, before phone books, before the yellow pages. And this was, it's huge, it's gigantic. And you'll see there's advertisements all along the block here. And it's gilded, it's just beautiful. So, 1875. You can, oh. So here's some examples of things. And there would be advertisements throughout also. Yeah. So a lot of publications at that time, especially directories, are full of advertisements, and they're very interesting. And the newspapers too, the advertisements are fascinating. Okay, so just to let you know, there were many more items. Like I said, these were the ones that we just kind of picked and chose. There's a couple more that are going to be on the tables to look at in a moment. Just so you know, these materials will be preserved, taken care of, promoted. They will be available for viewing, available for use by researchers in the Rush Archives, so contact the archives if you have further questions or do want to have your one-on-one moment with some of these things, because I know some of you do, I know. I know some of you. I'm also, like I said, going to be digitizing especially fragile or unique items and make them available online, so keep your eyes on the Rush Archives webpage. And like I said, there's already a lot of information online that, things that have been digitized, so check them out. So yeah, in a moment we're going to visit the tables if you want. There's another thing on the table, and that is if you have, some people have already been filling out these forms today, if you have memories of these 4 buildings that have come down, please submit a little memory and deposit it in the box over there. That would be really, really wonderful. There's sheets over there. There's postcards, there's trading cards. I'm giving a tour of the Rush Archives next week for American Archives Month. So yeah, there's a lot of things going on. And I want your stuff. So if you are from Rush, contact me if your department or you have records that need to come over to me and get transferred. So I suppose that's it. I don't really have instructions for wrapping us up, so I'll give it to Dr. Goodman.
Natalie, that was great. Certainly Rush is full of passionate people. I don't know how many passionate archivists there are in the world, but we've got one. This is tremendous. What I would say is a few things. I'm glad you mentioned the safe that was open. Certainly, I did have some image of 3 empty boxes or possibly 4, so that was good that while people had a great sense of humor in the early days of Rush, they weren't great practical jokers, so that was excellent news. What I would say is there are a couple of theories. One you mentioned of how something could be found in a box dated 1900 and something when the box was buried in the 1800s. You mentioned one, the box is reopened. There are other possibilities. And it brings me back to this idea of time travel. Now, first, going back to the history of Rush Medical College and the Chicago fire, for a short period of time, the medical school actually was at Cook County Hospital. And Cook County Hospital, that partnership led to our ability to keep going with the medical school at a critical time. And although when the school closed and reopened, we were no longer part of University of Chicago, obviously we're still considered them colleagues in the city and close partners, and that's been an important relationship like we have with other academic medical centers. Interestingly, when that fire burned down the original site of Rush Medical College just this year, we opened up an ambulatory center on Grand and Dearborn. It's just, so it's really, things come full circle. We wanted to time that with the opening of the time capsule for all of you, and we worked that out, I think, fairly well. I think lastly, as I think of the opening of a time capsule some 100 years later, it does remind me of 2 things. One is the very last part of the H.G. Wells movie on time travel, which, as you may remember, at the end, as the time traveler comes back to his present time in London and then goes back again, the housekeeper notices there are 3 books missing. And the last line of the movie, I think, is, which 3 books would you take? So the question is, if you were burying something in a time capsule today, what would you put in it? And I think one of the things, besides whatever you might want to put in it, and what I got out of this today was that what would be nice about putting a time capsule in the ground today is the memory of this, is that the idea that 100+ years later, people from across the community of Rush would come together and for a moment pause and think about the origin of Rush, all aspects of it, think about the city and what was going on some 100+ years later, and marvel at the fact that one of the things, actually several of the things in almost every box, were books of rules, things about hand washing, and lists, things we don't deal with at all today. So anyway, enjoy the rest of the day. See you.
It's not going to go on the page. I just want to, for the guys aren't dead, I just want to get them. Amanda, could you carry these over?